Welcome to Aging Gracefully. I want you to live a long, healthy life without regrets. And that being said, today is a very special program. Knowing that we have so many parents and grandparents dealing with their adult children with alcoholic and drug addiction problems, today we have a very special guest. Our youngest guest, in fact, Rachel McClure. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's so nice being here. Thank you so much for having me.
And I always do ask how old you are, so
I'm 28 years old and I will be 29 of March in 2020.
great. And I met you through a mutual friend, and so I'm so grateful that you would come and talk.
Of course, yeah.
And you're very qualified to do so. Let's talk about what you do in your career.
So yeah, I am a licensed mental health counselor. Currently I work for a private practice called Impact Counseling Solutions in Westlake. And I have about 5 to 6 years of experience so far in the field.
And you are not specifically a drug and addiction counselor.
No.
There's plenty of those to go around. What we want to focus on is really the ones who need some help as well, which is family members. And specifically today we're talking about parents and grandparents.
Yeah, so actually in my very first job, I worked in home-based and school-based counseling. And this is kind of where I got my first experience of that is, I didn't work with people who were specifically suffering with addiction, but I worked with the kids and then in turn, also the caretakers of those children, which in my case usually happened to be grandparents or, just other family members. So through working with the kids, I really got a taste of what these people were going through when a loved one was suffering with addiction.
So thank goodness there are people like you to help us. Because, Rachel, I don't know anyone whose life has not been touched by alcohol and drug addiction at this point.
Oh yeah.
I'd say the stigma is lessening as we're realizing that it's in everyone's family. It's in the neighborhoods. It's not in specific areas. It's everywhere. Every family is being touched by this.
Oh yeah. And I think, that's one thing, like you said earlier, I'm not a specific substance abuse counselor, but, being in the mental health world, I pretty much any client I've worked with in some capacity or form has either dealt with experiences in the past themselves or, at least a family member, friend, et cetera, someone who has, been impacted by addiction.
Right. So I have a number of friends who are grandparents who they either have their children and grandchildren living in the home or just the grandchildren. In fact, it's pretty common right now.
It is, yeah. And that's what, in my past experience, that was what I was working with, was these grandparents who had kind of, already done the job of raising children, were in that stage of life where they should be, into retirement, things like that, and they found themselves raising young children all over again.
Yeah, it's quite a crisis. So today we're going to talk about the don'ts and the do's of parenting or grandparenting someone with an alcohol or addiction problem. And so I've got this list right here because I didn't want to forget any one of these. So we'll start with the don'ts.
Okay.
Because then I think the do's are a little bit more on the positive side.
Yeah, definitely end on an uplifting note. I think that's nice.
There we go. All right, so the first one we have is don't nag your children or grandchildren about their addiction.
Yeah, I think this one is so important because, even though it's probably coming from a place of, caring and just concern, I think sometimes it can come off as nagging, and I think in this case, especially with addiction, even mental health in general, it's one of those things where the individual has to be ready to seek treatment, whether that be individual counseling, rehab, etc. They have to be in that headspace to get, to be ready themselves versus kind of being forced into it or, just constantly talked about or, come at or things like that.
So essentially it's wasted energy.
It really
even
is.
Go there. It's not going to hurry the process.
And I do think there are, that's not saying that you can't, air your concerns about it, but I think there's different ways to go about, airing a concern about the addiction and concern for, your child or grandchild.
How about this one? Don't number 2. Don't beg them to quit. You want to express how you feel in a non-judging manner, which is difficult, but that would be more acceptable than begging.
Definitely, yeah. I think that kind of goes, for that first point as well, kind of similar where, again, if they're not in, the stage of mind or just an area where they're ready to change, it's, kind of like you said earlier, it's just kind of wasted effort. But yeah, I like that, coming from a non-judgmental point of view, and again, just stating, hey, I'm concerned about you, this is what I'm seeing, but not kind of forcing that agenda onto them.
And that being said, I don't want to minimize the feelings that I could totally understand, just wanting to hold on to a loved one and plead with them, please stop.
Of course, yeah.
But again, that's just not, it doesn't help.
Yeah. And you're so right. That doesn't minimize that feeling. Of course, that feeling of concern, frustration, fear, is going to be there. But yeah, that's just different ways of how we express it, I think is what's key in this situation.
All right. Don't number 3. Don't get sucked down to the lowest level. You want to keep your head high. Don't let them bait you into your own bad behavior. Examples might be slamming doors and yelling, getting into major arguments that can be carried away.
Yeah, and I think this one is very tricky, because there is a lot of emotion, when it comes to something like this on both sides. Of course, you're dealing with your own frustration and concern, but then, you're also dealing with their emotions as well. And things can tend to get heated because people can be triggered or, just really upset, if they feel like defensive. So I think that is so important to just, keep as cool as possible, not giving into that, yelling back or, like you said, slamming doors, but just try to keep as level head and just keep as much composure as possible. Because I think when it comes to trying to get your feelings and your point across, the more level headed you are, the more likely the other person is going to hear it versus just hear, oh, you were yelling at me, or oh, here we go again. I think it's just, that's such a important factor.
And so also I think there's a lot of challenges of, kind of denying how you feel, because as the parent or grandparent of the person with the problem, it's like holding yourself down, holding your emotions down. And I think this is why really having a mental health counselor, someone that can help you, a support group, to really help. So you do have a place you can vent.
Oh,
so
definitely.
It doesn't all just have to be pushed down, but it just has an appropriate place.
Yes, of course, yeah. And of course I'm biased of being a counselor myself, but yeah, I truly believe having that outlet is just so important. One, just because you are dealing with a lot of emotions that maybe you've never, or situations too, that you've never had to deal with before, and just having that professional to kind of help you piece through it, pull it apart and figure out what am I actually feeling, but what do I actually want to convey to this person versus just having that raw emotion pop up and just kind of explode. Yeah, it's definitely so important to talk it out.
Right. Here's another one. Don't clean up their messes. So maybe it's clothes on the floor if they're living in your home, and maybe it's going and cleaning up their home if they don't live with you, or maybe it's a legal mess. And so I've seen this because I have so many people I know that are my age that are grabbing lawyers to help their children or their grandchildren. They're thinking, well, they're in such bad shape. Their home is such a mess. I go over there every couple weeks and try to help them out.
Yeah.
So,
And I think in this one, you know, is tricky because it's again, it's coming from a place of care. Of course, your first instinct, if someone's hurting, you know, or going through a rough time, you want to jump in and help, right? You know, I think that's just natural, especially as a parent, you know, especially when you see your child in just this awful situation. But I think, you know, where the lines can be crossed is kind of jumping in and always cleaning up those messes can actually lead to enabling certain behaviors. Because if you're always the one to fix it, the individual doesn't have that chance to take that personal accountability, you know, to really fix things themselves, you know, and get, you know, seek that help that they need themselves, because mom or dad will always do it for them.
is it possible it could even prevent them from hitting their bottom? You know, that if things aren't bad enough for them, they might not feel like there's enough reason to get help.
Yeah, you know, I haven't really looked at it that way, but that is a very good point. That, yeah, you know, if you're always in there saving them, you know, there's always that safety net. You know, they're never really experiencing what that true, you know, rock bottom is like, because someone's always there to help them not hit, you know, not hit that rock bottom.
But it's so counter to what we feel, you know, because again, we love these people. We don't want them to suffer.
Yeah.
We want to fix things if we can. We want to help them out. But in this case, maybe in the long term, the long road, what's best is let them pick up their own pieces.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, and that's so key though, that just because you do let them pick up those pieces doesn't mean you love them any less. You know, it's just a different type of love, or, you know, a different way to show your love is just by saying, you know, hey, this one, you gotta pick this one up yourself.
What a great point. It doesn't mean you love them any less, right? All right, number 5, don't seek out their recovery venues. Don't drive them to meetings. Let them figure it out themselves when they're ready, and that will help them get clean and sober. So, in other words, let's say someone, you know, we see this often, it gets mandated by the court. They have to go to meetings. So, if I understand this correctly, let someone from the meetings come pick them up, right? Because they do that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and in that world, that is so great because there is a lot of support, you know, especially like in meetings like AA or NA. And I think, you know, it kind of goes back to the point we just talked about. It kind of just helps them become more independent and really just take on the recovery themselves. You know, because again, I think we talked on this earlier. If they're not ready, you could do all this work and, you know, get the best resources and find the best, you know, whether it's counseling agency or, you know, rehab facility. But, you know, if they're not ready to take that step themselves, again, you're doing all that effort and they may decide not to go, because, you know, at the end of the day, it is, unless they're court mandated, you know, it's their choice. So, you know, you then might in turn feel like, oh, I failed. But in reality, you don't have control over that. So it is, yeah, it's so important to just have them, again, be more independent and really find a meeting or find, you know, a treatment facility. Again, not saying, of course, you know, they might need support and help along the way, but you can't do all the work for them.
And it could be different if it's more like, hey, Grandma, my ride canceled for tonight. Could you just take me tonight?
Exactly.
That's not what we're talking about. But the grandma or the mom or the dad, whatever that is, saying, hey, don't you need to get to a meeting tonight?
Exactly. Yeah, you can't be the only reminder, you know, or the only person who's encouraging them to go. Yeah, you know, you can help them if they're in a pinch, but you can't be the sole person they rely on, because that's exhausting, you know, to have to be that one person. That's very exhausting.
You know, we all carry our own burdens, our own loads, but when you're trying to carry someone else's as well, it's exhausting. So number 6, don't give money or lend money. And worth repeating, don't give money or lend money. Tell me why that would be.
Again, I think it goes back to kind of just the cleaning up the messes. It's so, in those times, of course, again, if they're in a pinch, if they can't afford rent and they're gonna lose their apartment or be foreclosed on, or, oh, they're not gonna have groceries for the next week. Of course you want to jump in and be like, oh, here, well, let me help you. But I think in those times, so many people get taken advantage of, though. Not because I'm totally not trying to generalize the whole population, but sometimes that money will be given and it won't actually be used, for the purpose of rent or food. Like sometimes it goes and turns around and, fuels that addiction again for whether it's drugs or alcohol or whatever. Even if, the individual has the best intentions of paying rent, that's just how strong addiction is that, they always keep turning back to it.
Right, so they might really need it for rent, but before it makes it to the right place, they're getting drugs with that money and the rent is forgone.
Yeah, exactly.
I know parents who have spent I've got to say over $100,000 for sure in helping with recovery.
Yeah.
And yet, the addict will come out of the recovery center and sometimes is using within 24 hours.
Exactly.
It's so difficult.
It
and
is,
that
yeah.
is just money gone. That's
And
hard.
again, and I think that's, that's just the nature of addiction, though, because, like I said, you could go in, even the individual, who has the addiction could go in with the best intentions, but that's just how strong, that addiction is you have all this great resources, information, but it doesn't matter because that substance, whether it be alcohol or drug, is just so strong that it could just erase, a whole 3-month time in rehab and just, go right back to it.
And you've repeated several times about how strong this is. And I think some people don't quite understand. They'll just say, oh my gosh, why don't they just stop it? But it really is so much more difficult than people understand.
It is, and and it's not, because trust me, I've worked with so many people that they're like, yeah, if I could just stop, I would, if it were as easy as just like, I woke up today and I don't feel like doing something, people, so many people would, and I think that's why you see people go into, or rehab or treatment 5, 6, 7 times, and that maybe that 7th time is the time that they finally, get clean and sober and stay that way, but, they have to get to that point themselves, and really, I mean, that's just sometimes how long it takes to just get that substance and just get that mindset, off of needing that substance.
Yeah, I think of how hard it is to eat one potato chip. How would you do if you could only have one M&M, right?
Exactly.
I mean, this is just so much stronger than anything like that we can relate to.
Exactly.
Unless you've been down that road and are recovering. And then there are the parents and grandparents that have cleaned themselves up who are now watching that next generation struggle.
Yeah.
It's hard.
It is.
All right, our last don't. Know that you did your best and the past is behind you now.
I think this one is so key because a lot of times people will try to, take the blame. Well, if I only did this different, or if I could have helped more here, I think a lot of people will stay stuck in the past of what could I have done differently. And of course, we can all look back and be like, oh, okay, I shouldn't have made that decision. But ultimately, you can't take responsibility 100%. That's it's not anyone's fault solely for why someone becomes addicted to these substances. And I think that's why, counseling piece is so important because not only are you learning to deal with the emotions of currently going, or helping someone or being with someone go through addiction, but you're also learning how to, kind of process through that maybe feeling of guilt, or things like that because of how it turned out.
And I think it's good for us in any situation to always remember the past is behind. It's already gone.
Exactly, yeah.
It's always back to the now, just like right now. Who are you right now?
Exactly, and what am I doing right now? And that, I think that is so important because if we get so wrapped up in the past, we're missing life, happening right in front of us.
Well, let's get into the do's now,
Okay.
which maybe just feel a little bit better because it gives us maybe some action points,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Some things we can feel like we're doing something. So do seek professional help.
Yes, I love that that's the first the first one on there, because yeah, I think, and kind of, you know, how we've been talking through all the don'ts, I think it is just so important to talk to someone, you know, and not even in the sense of, you know, oh, you're going through something horrific or super difficult, just having someone to talk to, even about the daily struggles. You know, we all have our everyday anxieties, you know, depression, like our moods are always, you know, kind of changing. So it's just so helpful to just have someone to talk to. And then when you have something to this scale, it's just so helpful to be able to just take that emotion and just all those feelings that are wrapped up, and just really figure out like what's going on, what am I feeling, and how do I just deal with this? Like how do I move forward from this?
Like we were talking about, this is the most emotional thing that a parent could ever deal with, and they are, in order for them to be their best self, they have to try to control that, to rein that in.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's no easy feat. Yeah, very difficult. I would say it, you know, it'd be very likely to bring out the worst in that parent or grandparent.
Yeah.
So yeah, professional help to really.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I
Bring
know
it
I'm
back
biased, but I
in.
advocate for it 100% because
Yes.
it is. And we could just always use more skills, you know, of how we think we can handle certain things, or certain things do work for a while, but then it's just we hit something we've never experienced before, and it's like, oof, yeah, I need some. It's just nice to have new skills to really work, especially something, you know, something to this level. It's just nice to really learn how to deal with it in a way that's going to just benefit you.
All right, do number 2, do find community support.
Yeah, I think this is maybe almost just as important as professional help, because, you know, the professional help's great, but it's a one-on-one thing. You know, you might see me once a week, or see, you know, your professional
For an
once a week
hour.
for an hour, and then you have to go live life, you know, through the week until the next time you would see your professional. So I think the community piece is so important, because those are the people that are going to be there for you, offering support for all of those other hours that you're not, you know, in a counseling session or something like that. And it's just so nice. It's a way to not feel isolated, because just like you said earlier, a lot of people, I mean, so many people are affected by this, but I think a lot of people still don't really talk about it much. And it's just so helpful to just be with other people going through something similar, if anything, just to say, hey, I'm not alone. You know, I'm not alone in this.
I think also when you're in a community support group, you might find opportunities to be helpful to someone else, which also can bring really good feelings. I think every time you step out of yourself and you're looking at how you can help someone else, well, that's just a feel good.
Definitely, yeah. And you're taking a situation that has been so difficult and kind of putting a positive spin on it too. And yeah, and just kind of bringing light to kind of a dark situation.
So I know in the article that will be with this interview, I'll make sure I've got the website for Al-Anon, and maybe I'll find another couple of support groups also to add to that.
Yes, definitely.
You know, all we have to do is go online and
Oh gosh, you can find so many resources.
right, look for support groups easily. So do number 3, do set personal boundaries. It's kind of similar to what you would tolerate when they were young.
Exactly, yeah.
I kind of like this because, you know, if you consider that child or grandchild when they're, say, 2 or 4 or 6, you wouldn't tolerate them talking to you disrespectfully. You wouldn't tolerate them stealing from you.
Exactly.
Doing any, or, you know, you wouldn't just reward them for bad behavior. So as an adult, kind of, if you put that in your mind, let's see, what would I do if this 28-year-old in front of me was a toddler right now?
Exactly. And I think boundaries are such a key point in dealing with something like this, because it's, you know, the person who's addicted to whatever substance, they're not going to like it, you know. So boundaries aren't for other people. Boundaries are for ourselves, to keep us protected, and just to make sure that we're being taken care of, and not, you know, being taken advantage of, or just constantly, you know, just being, you know, lied to, stolen from, etc. And I think they are so important. And the simplest way that I set a boundary is, what am I okay with in a situation and what am I not? You know, obviously, I know it's a little more complex than that, but to really start to formulate a boundary, though, you just really think about, what am I okay with? You know, so you might be okay with someone staying with you for a week, you know, if they need a place to land for, you know, for a minute to get back on their feet, but some people might not, you know, and just with stealing, some people might, you know, give it a second chance, but some people might say, nope, that's, you know, that's one time and I'm done. So it's really up to the individual. And I think that's where a counselor can, you know, be so helpful, because you can really pinpoint what's important to you, you know, because if we base it off other people, again, everyone thinks so differently about this. Like, you really have to figure this out for yourself, and what's going to help me and what's just going to help me thrive, you know, through this.
Right, which is so important. All right, and that kind of leads right into, do find ways to create joy. Ultimately, your responsibility to find your own joy in life, which is so hard because, again, these parents and grandparents, they're living life like by this thread, you know, so involved in what their child or grandchild is doing, understandably.
Oh, yeah.
And feeling like any day is the last day. Like, it's that severe of a crisis. Some parents do lose their children.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I mean, it's terrible. So throughout that, it's hard to understand how you could possibly find joy.
And I think, but that it is so important to find it, though, because, you know, something like this can feel all-consuming. And like you said, I mean, just that uncertainty of, are they okay or are they not okay? You know, that is very consuming. But still being able to find those things that bring you joy, whether it be, you know, making sure you're keeping up with like hobbies or interests, or, you know, if you go to church, you know, making sure you're catching up and going to church every Sunday, you know, or whatever you do. But I think it is so important to still find those little joys and still find enjoyment from life. And I think something where guilt kind of ties in for some people that I've worked with is, well, how can I be having a good time, or how can I be happy when, you know, this whole situation's going on? And that's where I say, you know, it's okay to find happiness and be happy, because if you don't, you're just going to be consumed by it too, and it's just going to hurt you even more if we're not trying to find those little brief moments even of joy.
You're right. Even if it were a brief moment. Wow, we're running out of time. Okay. And I just feel like we could talk about this for hours, right? Do honor and accept this. In fact, a difficult time, that self-care won't just feel good, but is necessary to your own well-being. Let's see. So it's a difficult time. Self-care, bringing joy, is not just something that feels good, like you said, where it's actually essential. It is vital to your existence. And that's what you have to remember, so that you're not feeling guilty that, oh, how am I going to go out and have a good time when my son or daughter or whatever is in this crisis.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's so, and like you said it perfectly, but a little tidbit is self-care can be anything from making sure you're taking care of your basic needs. So are you showering? Are you eating? You know, are you doing those basic things too? You know, going back to the joy piece, like going out and enjoying yourself, because it is so important to continue to take care of yourself through this time.
Right. And the last one, the last do is do release with love. Kind of wraps it all up as well. You have to have your own life.
Exactly, yeah. And you have, and like I said, it can be so consuming, but yeah, you do have to have your own life and, you know, still do your own things. Because again, if not, it's just going to consume you, and that's not a life you want to live. And, you know, yeah, you can still love the individual, but while also loving and taking care of yourself.
Well, these are really great don'ts and do's. We also have some hotline numbers, phone numbers, and I'll make sure that these are written on the article on the website as well, so they can be handy. So as we wrap it up, let me just ask for ageless advice. You might be you are the youngest on the show, but you've worked with a lot of older adults, generations beyond you. So let me just ask, what do you think, Rachel, is the secret to aging gracefully?
So yeah, I think my thought on that is just everybody could use somebody to talk to. Again, like I said, whether you're dealing with a situation this intense or just everyday stressors, it's just so important to have that outlet, you know, an unbiased, just third-party person to just talk to and work through these emotions and just learn some awesome skills of just how, you know, how to just live your life to the fullest.
Mm-hmm. Living a long, healthy life
Exactly.
without regrets.
Yes, yes.
There we go. Well, thank you so much for being here today. I think this information is wonderful and so timely right now. So.
Yeah, and thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
And to our viewers, thank you so much for joining along with us today. And this is important information that I know you're going to want to share with other parents and grandparents, maybe relatives, neighbors. Please do share this information. If you haven't been to my website, please go to www.aginggracefully.tv, where you can watch this over and over again if you like. And there are plenty of other short, quick videos and quick to read articles of all kinds of relevant information for you. Thank you.
Thank you.